Jae-hwan looked at Beast Rain and declared with certainty that he had no intention of going back to the past. Beast Rain chuckled, his laughter echoing through the chamber. "Ah, still caught up on that, are we?" he sneered. "Let's get one thing straight, there's no such item here in the tower, or anywhere else for that matter, that can send you back. Any idea to the contrary? Pure illusion." He glanced at Jae-hwan with a bemused expression. "All those so-called return stones are just tricks?" Jae-hwan was taken aback. His mind raced back to the words of the ice dragon, Velchasis. If only his race hadn't been fooled by the dream demon stone. The pieces started to come together, and Jae-hwan's face paled. He realized the gravity of Beast Rain's words, a sinking feeling in his chest. Beast Rain grinned wider, seeming to relish Jae-hwan's confusion. "The stone you humans thought could return you to the past? That's the dream demon stone," Beast Rain explained, a tone of mockery in his voice. "It doesn't send anyone back. It traps you in an endless cycle of dreams created by the demon within. Your kind has chased after this illusion for eons. Obsessed with going back, unable to accept the present. It's a particularly human flaw." Jae-hwan felt a sense of dread, yet he couldn't deny the truth in Beast Rain's words. "He's right," he thought. "We've always been obsessed with the past." Beast Rain eyed him with a peculiar admiration. "Ah, you're more insightful than most. But now that we've cleared up that little misunderstanding, shall we finally begin the real game?" A notification appeared before Jae-hwan, congratulating him on clearing the transparent tutorial and inquiring if he wished to continue. Beast Rain smirked, evidently confident that Jae-hwan would make the logical choice to start over. But Jae-hwan's expression hardened. He stood his ground and refused, declaring that he had no desire to participate in this twisted cycle. Beast Rain was caught off guard, his composure faltering for the first time. He blinked in shock as if such a possibility had never occurred to him. Jae-hwan offered a small, defiant smile. "Thanks to you, I've learned a lot about this tower and its tricks. But you won't be pulling me into your game again?" Before Beast Rain could recover, another notification flashed behind him, this time listing the full details of the Tower of Nightmare and Jae-hwan's role as a tower walker. The revelation startled Beast Rain, who hadn't anticipated Jae-hwan would break free from his grasp so easily. The explanation that followed revealed the Tower of Nightmares was also known as the Stronghold of Regrets, the second creation of the nightmare dream demon, Mulak. Those who agreed to be summoned into the tower were drawn into the dream world fabricated by the dream demon. Jae-hwan understood now. He was trapped in the demon's dream, his entire climb through the tower nothing more than an elaborate illusion. But if this was the case, he wanted to confront and defeat the mastermind behind it all, Beast Rain, and move to the next level. Beast Rain sighed, rubbing his temples in exasperation. "There is no next level," he muttered. "This is the end of the tower. There's nothing beyond this." But Jae-hwan didn't believe a word. He knew Beast Rain had lied before, particularly about the world being saved. Beast Rain chuckled, wondering aloud if the reward for clearing the tutorial had been too disappointing for Jae-hwan. "I can't believe you're pushing forward with those meager memories just for a reward," the devil mocked. Ignoring Beast Rain's taunts, Jae-hwan launched an attack straight at the devil's head, which dissolved into nothingness. As his head began to regenerate, Beast Rain laughed again. "What do you want? A hidden skill? A rare item?" He offered everything Jae-hwan could desire, as if it were well within his power to grant such things. But Jae-hwan remained focused, uninterested in anything Beast Rain had to offer. Seeing his offer dismissed, Beast Rain's grin twisted into a knowing smirk. "Ah, I see. You want to return to your original world, don't you?" the devil said, certain that Jae-hwan must have realized by now that everything, the entire tower, was just a dream within the Tower of Nightmares. There was no actual impact on the real world. Jae-hwan froze, startled by Beast Rain's words. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. But before he could process the devil's meaning, his surroundings shifted abruptly. He was no longer in the tower. Instead, he found himself standing in the real world, confused and disoriented. Nearby, a young woman apologized to her friend for being late, explaining that there had been too much traffic. As Jae-hwan turned to look, he heard her ask her companion if he had bought the movie tickets in advance, to which the man replied that he hadn't. The scene felt surreal, yet undeniably real, leaving Jae-hwan in shock, unsure of what had just happened. The girl, visibly irritated, snapped at her friend. "Fine, I'll buy them myself. Just hurry up." Her frustration seemed to echo around Jae-hwan, who stood there, bewildered by the situation. Before he could even gather his thoughts, the world around him shifted again, and suddenly, he found himself on a train. The passengers were all seated comfortably, smiling and chatting, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Beast Rain's voice slithered into Jae-hwan's mind. "Starting to realize what's happening, are we?" the devil teased. "Surprising, isn't it? Nobody died in the real world. Your family and friends, they're all alive. The devil grinned as he peeked at the phone of a boy sitting nearby, who was browsing something that even Beastrain found peculiar. The devil paused for a moment, then chuckled. "Oh, how careless of me," he said, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "I almost forgot to show you the most important thing." With a snap of his fingers, the scene shifted once more. Now, Jae-hwan found himself standing in a hospital ward. Doctors and nurses moved briskly from bed to bed, checking on the patients. One doctor inquired about a specific patient's condition, and a nurse responded, "No change, still in a deep sleep." Jae-hwan stepped closer to one of the beds, his heart pounding in his chest. There, lying unconscious, was himself. He stared in disbelief, frozen by the sight of his own body, untouched by time. Beastrain's voice echoed around him again, smug as ever. "Decades have passed for you in the Tower of Nightmares, but in this world, only a month has gone by. Quite the contrast, isn't it?" Jae-hwan's mind reeled at the realization. "So, this was all just a dream," he muttered, trying to process it. Beastrain's laughter cut through his thoughts. "Don't get too comfortable," the devil warned. "You barely scraped through the tutorial, and you think you can beat me? You're no match for me. The difference between us is like the gap between humans and dragons." Jae-hwan smirked, exhaling slowly. "A dragon, huh? That's a relief. I've killed one of those before." The devil's expression twisted in frustration, clearly not expecting such cheek from Jae-hwan. Enraged, Beastrain launched a sudden attack, but Jae-hwan was ready, blocking it effortlessly. The scene shifted again. Jae-hwan found himself back in Ada pose, battered and bruised but alive. He stumbled toward Jae's shop, a bottle of liquor clutched in his hand. He pushed the door open, ready to tell Jae he had returned. But as he looked around, the shop was empty. Jae was nowhere to be found. The entire shop was now covered in thick spider webs, giving off the impression that Jae had abandoned it long ago. Jae-hwan walked in, preparing to mold and modify his sword by himself. Thanks to the skills he had previously learned from Jae, he had been able to maintain his weapon for the past 72 days, relentlessly challenged day after day without a single moment of rest. No matter how many times he attacked the devil, he couldn't leave even a scratch on him. Strangely enough, he hadn't been killed either. He wasn't sure why, but it seemed the Beastrain had no intention of ending his life. Despite this, Jae-hwan refused to lose hope, no matter how many days or even years it might take. Meanwhile, the devil, growing anxious, was biting his nails in frustration. He knew that Jae-hwan was no ordinary product, and this was the reason for his unease. Jae-hwan, as a product, was unique, something the devil had never encountered before. A cultivator's role was to ensure that a product would successfully adapt to the almighty land. By using a secondary process, they helped refine and develop these products. The primary method involved culling out undesirable seeds, leaving only the good ones, which was exactly what the tutorial game had done, sifting through to find valuable products. These selected products would then grow and thrive during the actual game. The secondary process involved nurturing the chosen seeds with water and fertilizer to prepare them for the next stage. However, if a product refused to progress, they would simply kill it, closing their eyes to it. The user's soul wouldn't be destroyed upon death in the tower, but the devil was concerned that Jae-hwan's soul would be damaged due to the vast difference between them. This worried the devil, especially since he knew that the harvesters would not sit still if they found out about this. The devil had intended to raise Jae-hwan properly and sell him, as it was his time to rise to a high-ranking devil. Moreover, the devil had to repay the loan he had taken to purchase this tower, and Jae-hwan was such a rare product that even the gods, who typically didn't involve themselves with devils, had reached out to him. Suddenly, Jae-hwan launched a surprise attack on the devil, who groaned in frustration, muttering that this was starting to wear him thin. The devil casually blocked the assault with one hand, looking at Jae-hwan with a mix of irritation and curiosity. He asked what Jae-hwan wanted, clearly believing that he must have some reason for acting so recklessly. "Aren't you tired of this already?" the devil questioned, pointing out that things would have gone differently if Jae-hwan had only listened and entered the real game. In his world, people would have said what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so why was Jae-hwan behaving this way? With a flick of his finger, the devil conjured a glass-like barrier between them, his fury growing. He demanded to know if Jae-hwan was serious about this fight. Jae-hwan, momentarily stunned, noticed the devil's reflection appear behind him, forcing him to grip his sword tightly and whirl around to strike. But before his blade could connect, he was thrown back violently, crashing into the glass wall and coughing up blood. The devil, now enraged, grabbed Jae-hwan by the throat and, despite his anger, calmly asked again what exactly he wanted. The devil even offered hidden skills, powerful items, anything Jae-hwan desired. Yet, Jae-hwan remained resolute. He bluntly declared that he was going to take down the devil and move to the next floor. The devil could hardly believe that Jae-hwan was still clinging to that notion. He asked, bewildered, what it would take to make Jae-hwan see sense and just move on to the actual game. Jae-hwan, though battered, smirked, pleased that he had pushed the devil this far. He finally spoke, saying he had one last question for the devil. The devil, almost exhausted from this conversation, sighed and told Jae-hwan not to be shocked by the answer. The truth, he said, was that this universe wasn't confined to a single dimension. Jae-hwan simply nodded, revealing that he already knew, as this was common knowledge. The devil, taken aback, stared at Jae-hwan with newfound surprise, wondering if Jae-hwan had some background in science or had learned more than he had let on. The protagonist calmly mentioned that concepts like parallel universes and the multiverse were well known even on Earth. This prompted the devil to elaborate further, explaining that the main dimension was known as the Almighty Land. From that central dimension, countless alternate worlds branched off, with Earth being just one tiny planet within a vast dimensional system. He called Earth the 294th world, one of many scattered across these alternate realities. In the Tower of Nightmares, walkers could acquire skills, items, and work on their stats, allowing them to adapt to the laws of the Almighty Land. This, in turn, provided them the opportunity to travel to other worlds. The devil explained that his role was to facilitate this game, helping players grow stronger and move on to new dimensions. The protagonist pondered for a moment before asking why the devil was even doing this. What did he stand to gain from playing such a role? The devil, slightly surprised, found it hard to believe that this was what Jae-hwan was truly curious about. With a snap of his fingers, they were suddenly transported outside the Tower of Nightmares, into a desolate, destroyed land. The devil smirked, guessing that Jae-hwan might be wondering why the tower had appeared on his world in the first place. Jae-hwan's curiosity deepened, and the devil could sense it. He revealed that out of the countless alternate worlds, it was mere coincidence that the Tower of Nightmares had descended upon Jae-hwan's planet. The protagonist clenched his fist and said that was enough, he didn't need more details. He only wanted to understand why someone like the devil was overseeing the tower. The devil faltered, momentarily caught off guard. He hadn't expected Jae-hwan to ask what he gained from operating the tower. Flustered, the devil tried to regain his composure as Jae-hwan's persistent question left him momentarily speechless. The devil hesitated for a moment before offering an explanation that seemed less than genuine. He casually mentioned that his involvement in this process was a form of volunteer work that devils like him did from time to time. He hoped Jae-hwan would buy into this, but judging by the protagonist's unimpressed expression, it was clear he wasn't convinced. Sensing the skepticism, the devil added that volunteering was something they greatly enjoyed, and many of his kind observed extraordinary walkers from various planets. He then mentioned a place called Paradise, where creatures such as monsters and devils lived harmoniously with humans. His tone was almost pleading as he spoke, a worried smile crossing his face, hoping his story would be accepted. However, the protagonist simply stared at him, seeing through the obvious lies. None of what the devil said seemed even remotely truthful. A few days earlier, Jae-hwan had left the control room and reviewed his status. His level had reached 100, with every stat, agility, strength, health, willpower, and mana, maxed out. Despite that, he still couldn't defeat the devil. Frustrated, he drank a potion and lay down, contemplating why even with his abilities maxed, he couldn't overpower the devil. He assumed it must have something to do with this world system, where stats alone weren't enough for a human to defeat a demon. Suddenly, Jae-hwan felt something unfamiliar. It was a sensation he had never experienced before, and it caught him off guard. Looking around, he noticed countless golden particles floating in the air. At first, he thought he was hallucinating. He reached out, grasping a handful of the particles, feeling them shift in his palm. Sometimes they were smooth, almost delicate, and other times they were rough and jagged, like small crystals. Each time, they transformed, changing in structure and texture. In that moment, Jae-hwan instinctively realized that these particles must be the building blocks of this world. Now, as he observed the devil, he noticed words forming in the air above his head, revealing his thoughts. The words spoke of the monarch cultivating and gathering resources for the devil, and Jae-hwan was struck by how absurd the devil's talk of volunteer work truly was. Intrigued, Jae-hwan asked the devil about these masters and whether they were akin to kings. The question delighted the devil, who had finally sparked the protagonist's interest. The devil eagerly explained that the masters were powerful entities in the Great Realm. Those who completed the main game and ascended to that realm often received party recommendations from these masters. Jaehwan, stunned by the concept of party recommendations, listened as the devil affirmed that the future of any successful player would depend on which master they chose to follow. The devil suddenly lunged at the protagonist, grabbing him tightly and babbling on, promising that if Jaehwan followed his instructions, he swore on his demonic honor to ensure that Jaehwan would end up with a powerful master. He even playfully poked Jaehwan's cheek with a sharp nail, emphasizing that this would only happen if Jaehwan willingly agreed to participate in the main game. The protagonist dryly commented that the devil sounded like a pushy salesman, catching the devil off guard. The devil, visibly puzzled, protested that he wasn't trying to sell anything. Despite the devil's odd behavior, Jaehwan agreed to follow his lead, deciding to leave the place in 10 days. 9 days later, Jaehwan was still diligently practicing his thrusts on training dummies, while the devil, sitting nearby, was becoming increasingly irritated. He muttered to himself about how tiresome it was to watch the protagonist go through the same repetitive motions. Yet, despite his frustration, the devil knew he had almost convinced Jaehwan, so he forced himself to remain patient. The devil's irritation quickly shifted to rage as he remembered how he had been tricked into purchasing the cursed Tower of Nightmares. Angrily slamming his fist on the sofa, he cursed the dream demons for misleading him. He vividly recalled the day the dream demon pitched the tower to him, painting it as a masterpiece crafted by a high-ranking demon. The devil had been convinced it was a bargain, a rare opportunity to own a tower at such a low price. However, it turned out to be a disappointing relic, an outdated first-generation model. The newer, third-generation towers came with a feature that allowed owners to immediately stop the tutorial without damaging their products. The devil had only realized this flaw when he tried to relocate the participants, believing he had secured a premium product, only to discover there was no option to shut down the tutorial. He was furious, feeling cheated, and regretted ever trusting the dream demon. The devil cursed the outdated first-generation tower, frustrated that it required the product's consent to halt the game. While he desperately tried to manipulate Jaehwan into agreeing to his offer, he grew increasingly anxious as Jaehwan remained stubborn, insisting on fighting him instead. The devil lamented his poor fortune, muttering that this was the price he paid for being unable to afford a better tower. Still, what sustained him was the hope that, despite all its flaws, this tower would at least function as intended. All his worries, however, were supposed to end the next day, as Jaehwan had promised to accept the offer after 10 days. When the day finally arrived, Jaehwan received a series of notifications just before he was about to accept the invitation to join the main game. The system informed him about the Tree of Illusion, its roots, structure, and the different fruits it bore. He was also provided with crucial information about the Great Realm, explaining how it would enhance his adaptability and what he needed to know to become an adapted player. The system also outlined 12 key areas in the Great Realm he should visit, along with details about the monarch of the Great Realm and 101 reasons to journey there. Then, a new message appeared. The Game Master had decided to end the tutorial, offering Jaehwan the chance to return to World 294. He could enter the main game with all his memories intact, and the system asked if he would accept this proposal. Devil Beastrain was elated. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the day Jaehwan would finally accept his terms. The devil eagerly asked Jaehwan if he had memorized all the information in the files he had sent. When Jaehwan confirmed and even thanked him, the devil, overwhelmed with emotion, instructed him to press the accept button. He had anticipated this day for so long that he was taken aback by how sentimental he felt, nearly moved to tears. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, Jaehwan suddenly attacked the devil without warning. Furious, the devil demanded to know if Jaehwan understood the gravity of what he was doing. Jaehwan, unfazed, gripped his sword tightly and replied with a cold smirk, asking if it wasn't obvious. The protagonist firmly declared that from this moment on, he would relentlessly continue his attacks and immediately struck the devil once more. Ever since he began seeing the strange particles in the air, his senses had felt off, as though something new was awakening within him. Each time he lunged at the devil, he sensed a subtle shift. The devil, in response, attempted to grab him, but Jaehwan swiftly severed his arm. Astonished, Jaehwan marveled at the sensation of pain, almost reveling in the feeling of being alive. However, just as he was savoring the moment, a magical trap was triggered. Vines erupted from the ground, binding the protagonist. These vines were from the black ironwood of the 91st floor. As the devil began regenerating his severed arm, he remarked with a smirk that he had never encountered anyone quite like Jaehwan before. He mused aloud, wondering why Jaehwan hadn't acted this way from the start. It would have made things simpler for both of them. He then asked if Jaehwan agreed. The protagonist, now entangled by the 91st floor vines, questioned what the devil intended to do next, knowing full well the game couldn't end without his consent. The devil, named Beastrain, confirmed this, but confessed that he had long abandoned the idea of seeking Jaehwan's approval. Instead, he had a question for the protagonist: why did Jaehwan assume this tutorial game would last forever? The devil continued, revealing a crucial detail about the Nightmare Tower. If more than 100 days passed after completing the tutorial, the game would automatically terminate. This revelation caught Jaehwan off guard. He had no prior knowledge of such a condition. Beastrain explained that Jaehwan would remain stuck in this place until it was time to start the main game. Jaehwan gripped his sword, Beastrain the demon, and asked with a piercing gaze, "Is it true that they call you the trickster in the Great Realm?" The devil was shocked by this unexpected question, but his astonishment deepened when Jaehwan added, "You're 784 years old, and you've roamed 128 different worlds, cultivating various species in each one, like the wicked creature you are." Stunned, Beastrain demanded to know how Jaehwan had acquired such information. But Jaehwan, undeterred, continued, stating that Jaehwan would soon be handed over to the harvester known as the Master of Darkness, another revelation that left the devil deeply unsettled. The devil, growing increasingly anxious, began to wonder who Jaehwan truly was, as the protagonist seemed to possess knowledge far beyond what he should. Little did Beastrain know, the words revealing his true nature were visible above his head, and Jaehwan was reading them with ease. The protagonist grinned, his eyes gleaming with confidence, and asked the devil, "Do you really know who I am?" He taunted Beastrain, calling himself the very product the devil had been nurturing for decades within this twisted game. In an instant, a massive surge of energy erupted from Jaehwan's body, shattering the grip of the black ironwood vines. As he stood free, Jaehwan looked directly at the devil and declared with unwavering conviction, "I'm not your creation anymore.